Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 53 of the Canvascasters podcast. This is a very special episode. We are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month here with a live stream. So we're coming to you live here on October, October 5th. But we're also going to be posting this same video on YouTube. And it will be a podcast. So if you can't check out the video this evening live, or you are going to do what you usually do, which is listen to your podcast while you're on the treadmill or walking the dogs or whatever it is that you do, you'll still be able to get the podcast there in your usual places on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Anchor, Overcast. Those are all the ones I know. So I'm here with Jenni, is it Balcom?
Yes, Balcom.
Okay. And Jenni came to, I reached out to Jenni because I kind of put an all call out for a very specific request. I wanted to do something really cool to sort of celebrate National Hispanic Heritage Month. And the ask was that we've talked on the podcast. We've been doing this podcast for 3 years, and we've had lots of episodes where we've talked about, language acquisition and working with language and the tools within Canvas that make that happen better. But we're not actually going to really focus on that this evening. We're actually going to focus a little bit more on history and culture. So welcome once again. I'm going to go back to my script because I just, as folks know, it takes me about 4 seconds to get off script. So let's see. Welcome to a very special Instructure Live event in celebration of National Hispanic Heritage Month. With me this evening is Jenni Balcom, a fifth-year teacher at Episcopal Collegiate School. I almost got it. An independent school in Little Rock, Arkansas. She teaches 6th to 10th grade students Spanish and co-sponsors a middle school language club. In 2019, Jenni won the Arkansas Foreign Language Teacher Association's Teacher of Promise Award for new teachers that demonstrate outstanding potential. She is a Level 2 Google certified educator and is currently finishing up her master's in science and education for curriculum and instruction. She is a proud mom to a cat, to a dog, a foster son, and a baby to be born in March of 2023. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
Outstanding. Welcome to the world of, continuing to chase living things around your home. You've got children and pets.
Cool.
So you're probably running around with like running shoes on all the time. For sure. Outside of school, Jenni spends a lot of time with her church family, serving as the children's worship coordinator and on the missions committee. Welcome to the Canvascasters podcast live.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking time. One of the big things I kind of joke about on these podcasts and so forth is how difficult it is. My audience, all educators, my pool of potential guests, pretty much always mostly educators. So man, oh man, it is tough to find time in your busy schedule to find time to chat. But I'm excited that you were able to carve out some time for us this evening. I do feel it necessary for not only for Jenni, but for anyone watching and anyone who will watch. I think it's important for everyone to recognize that I did actually earn the most improved Spanish student in my freshman Spanish class. I think that's important for context. Now, the most improved student, and I shout out to Senora Davidson at Warren Central High School in Indianapolis, Indiana. But I remember getting that, and that was the first time that I thought to myself, does most improved, there's a connotation to that. Isn't there?
The most improved award. There's a feeling about it for sure.
Yeah. Like I'm stoked because I got a certificate at the end of the year. But if I dig deep, if I take the layers away, I think that must mean that I was uh, terrible at one point or really bad.
Not necessarily.
I hope not, but that's
Maybe you just
always
went from good to great.
good to great. Oh, see now,
It
see you
could
put a
be.
spin on it. I like that spin. I like that spin. Okay, I feel a lot better about it. But yes, shout out to Senor Davidson. She always used to say oreja, and I always thought, like to this day, it still sticks in my head. So enough about my weird awards. So beyond your bio, which everyone just heard, tell us a little bit about what gets you really excited about your day-to-day teaching life.
Oh, I love to teach Spanish. I have a lot of interests, and actually, I had originally started wanting to teach music, um, but I am really glad that I ended up in the world language field because with Spanish, I we can talk about all sorts of things all year long. We do get to talk about history and culture, but we also get to talk about music and pretty much anything else we want to. I get to do math problems with the students if that's working with their brains better for numbers or something. Um, Also, I have really enjoyed specifically the middle school group and the younger high school group. I wasn't sure that I would when I got into teaching, but they are a unique group of people and they're really fun. They're very curious about the world and eager to try new things, despite some popular beliefs, I feel like. And so
Yeah,
I enjoy teaching them languages because they're curious about how that works.
for sure. That's awesome. I too. I come from secondary. I taught for 20 years. Taught English. When you said you started out as a potentially a music teacher, I'm so glad you said exactly what I was kind of hoping in my brain because I was like, that's another thing I remember about Spanish was there was a lot of music. It felt like in all
Yes.
of my classes, I've been kind of digging back into the archives, leading up to our chat, and I do remember a lot of my classes having music in the background or having experiences including music. So that sounds like it was a really good transition for you. Um, the the middle school slash younger ages, I am with you. Um, I remember I've taught sixth grade. I've taught every grade between 6 and 12 except juniors. Not sure how
Okay.
that happened, but I do recall the middle school teaching days, sixth and seventh grade, language arts and speech and things like that. And I definitely thought that was just a unique group. And it's what's really weird now is
They're
having
excited.
they're high energy. But you make a good point. They're excited to learn something like a foreign language. That I definitely remember
Mhm.
seeing. And it's almost like you just have to use your skills to harness the
Exactly.
energy, right?
Contain it or yes,
Yeah,
direct
yeah.
it.
Yeah, direct it. That's probably a better word. Direct it.
Right.
And the it's interesting, especially with Spanish, because not every like in the schools that I taught at, we had some like introductory Spanish courses, maybe as far down as like seventh grade. Um,
Mhm.
and then when you got to high school, you started sort of digging in a little bit. Tell us a little bit off script, of course. Tell us a little bit about your school and what might make it sort of unique.
Sure. So we're all kind of on one campus. It's an independent school. We're all on one campus, and there are three different buildings though. And so in the elementary level, we call it the lower school. They are getting Spanish exposure really early, even as early as pre-K, and that will be a few days a week. And then by the time they get to sixth grade, they have a quarter long class with me that, like you said, is kind of an introductory course. It's really quick, but it can be a fun experience too because they are getting just a taste of like what it's like to dissect the grammar, and
Yeah.
um, they have a lot of fun with it. And then in seventh grade, they can choose to take a modern language, either French or Spanish, or they can wait until ninth grade. And so I have some interesting dynamics with Spanish 1 and Spanish 2. It's a mix of seventh and ninth grade in Spanish 1, and then a mix of eighth and 10th as that progression in Spanish 2. So we also have Latin at our school, but that's kind of how the Spanish and French would work in the 7th through 12th grades.
Wow, nice. Well, yeah, and I, as an English teacher, I always appreciated my students that took Spanish because I felt like they were able to grasp grammar better. Because the lovely thing about Spanish compared to English anyway is that there are grammar rules that are consistent and don't have 900 variations, right? So I always appreciated that when kids would come into my freshman English class and they would have that connection from something they learned in Spanish, or that stem or that root, or these words are related, and it was like, you guys are doing the work for me. So I appreciate I appreciate you Spanish teachers for helping me out with the grammar. So let's dig into a little bit here. It's National Hispanic Heritage Month. We're getting towards the end of the month, and you mentioned earlier, you talked about your love of and passion for music, and then I think I remember these parts in my student life, the history and culture part of Spanish. I don't remember it being as prominent. I remember bits and pieces. Like I said, I remember hearing lots of music in class. I, frankly, for me, I'm of an age, I remember lots of workbook pages where it was, conjugating like crazy, the verbs and so forth. And I know that that's obviously a huge part of the curriculum, but I think people don't recognize that there is a lot of history and culture and geography and things of that nature as well. So that's really what I want to focus on here this evening with the time that we've got. What sorts of activities have you been including in your classes in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month?
So for Hispanic Heritage Month, and like you said, there is history and culture. We try to focus on it, but you have to do it alongside that language. And so it's hard to make it where it's authentic and you're exploring it and not just kind of what we call like a touristy, here's a snapshot, and make it a little bit more important.
Yep.
The other thing is that even though there are cultural standards for world language, there's not really anything that says, okay, you have to teach these certain cultural events or traditions or practices. And so it's more about teaching products and practices and perspectives, but you get to choose what you want to teach within those contexts. And so it's about creating global citizens and empathetic students and critical thinkers. And for Hispanic Heritage Month, much like Black History Month, we want to teach those things all year round. It's not just during the middle of September to the middle of October. There are things that we work on in every unit.
Yep.
So for Hispanic Heritage Month specifically, I do like to try to focus, since it's a national holiday, on some more Hispanic Americans or Latinx Americans. That way it is more about people that are within our culture in the United States that students might already know or that represent their interests. So specifically for Spanish 1, we're currently in like the second month of school, so they don't have a whole lot of language experience yet.
Right, yeah.
But they are learning about their interests and learning to talk about me gusta, te gusta, what they like to do. And so we will choose a Spanish-speaking person, a Hispanic or Latin American person who represents their interests. And we'll look at, so actually, sorry, I'll back up for a second because that's more helpful.
Sure.
We'll start off by looking at our interests compared to the most popular interests of students in Mexico. I have a little infographic that I got from the Instituto Mexicano de la Juventud, I think is what it is, that talks about the most popular activities for young people in Mexico. And so they'll look at the statistics in Spanish, and that's all in the language, where they see what people like to do the most there. And then after comparing those to what their most popular interests are among themselves as a class, then they will look at that person. They'll look up a person who represents their own interests. And they can only answer a couple of questions in Spanish at that point, but they can do both. They can talk about why that person is influential to others in their field, and whether that sport is popular or whether that activity is popular in Spanish speaking culture, as popular as it is in the States, things like that in Spanish
Yep.
1.
Yep. Do you
And
find
in
that?
Spanish 2 we do something a little bit more in depth, but
So I'm interested because do you find that, because I've talked, what I'm kind of seeing a connection with you starting students with learning the language, and it sounds like, being this early in the school year, not having much of that yet, but wanting to keep that excitement that you talked about, uh, and they're probably all sorts of excited because it's just the beginning of the school year, and it's like, oh, I still forget my locker combination and all that good stuff. But
absolutely.
yeah, you'll have some in May that'll still be doing that. Um,
Sure.
but I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting and smart tactic or strategy to use the personal interest connection to the content, right? Because that's an easy pathway, right? I
Yeah.
think what you describe, and you may be like, duh, like this is obvious, but I think that maybe it isn't as obvious to everyone. Uh, that personal connection to sort of open up the student's eyes to the cultural similarities and differences, that's way more effective, I would think, than basically almost making it a dynamic sort of face to face, like, here's how different it is in, Spanish speaking countries, and here's how we are. And like, it's almost contradictory. Like, um, what you're doing is you're basically saying, find the connection, make a connection, which goes back to that empathy. And I'm sure I can already, thinking back to my own students, and I'm sure that you've got dozens of middle school boys who are, super into sports, and so they make those connections with, football versus football, and football
Right.
americano and all that kind of stuff, and they realize that, like, oh, everybody doesn't care about quite the same way about, American football or NBA basketball, maybe because soccer is so popular. Is that something that
Yes,
you
or
that you
they'll
see?
find like they'll find a new role model that they're like, oh, this person is really, really cool. And I've gotten to know a whole lot of people through their experiences. I'll have students who will find a gamer, and I'm like, this person is a really big deal apparently, and I would have had
Yeah.
no idea that they existed,
Yep.
except for that my student was interested and they found them. And so it is about trying to find that hook. A lot of them come in, they're having to take their language requirements and get it over with. And so I'm hoping to find something that they can at least connect to and see, okay, well, I could do this thing that I do all the time. I can watch the sport that I watch, or I can watch YouTube streamers, do their games and things, but I can do it in Spanish now and maybe have even more opportunities to connect with the world.
Awesome. Yeah, it's the doing this, kind of pulling the blinders back a little bit for them, especially at that age. I've got a 12-year-old daughter, and I feel like that is an ongoing process and challenge, is trying to help uh, learners of that age be open-minded, compassionate, willing to see things that maybe are a little bit different than what they're accustomed to. So I appreciate when I see that in any class, and especially here with your Spanish classes. It's just very, very valuable. So you mentioned Spanish 2. Tell us about what you do there.
Yeah, so in Spanish 2, we are also looking at, during Hispanic Heritage Month, we're also looking at Hispanic Americans or Latinx Americans. Um, Again, we do things throughout the whole year, depending on the theme that we're currently in, the vocab that we're trying to work with, whether it's weather or music or
Mhm.
shopping and eating, those kinds of things. But I try to focus on Hispanic or Latinx Americans during this month. And so for Spanish 2, we're about to learn about daily routines. And so they will investigate a Hispanic or Latinx American, and I will give them an article. And so that the language is accessible to them, it's actually at the Spanish 2 level. I'll pick articles instead of letting them choose just openly, but I'll have different people like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez or Lin Manuel Miranda, Carmelo Anthony, Jennifer Lopez, people that they might already know depending on their interests. And then they will read about them. And then using the grammar and vocab we're learning, they'll learn to talk about their daily routine. Now, they do have to stretch their imaginations a little bit because most people, JLo's not talking about her teeth brushing routine anywhere on the internet. So
I don't
they
know.
have
The
to
internet's a
mix
big,
things up a
scary
little bit.
place.
That's true. People vlog about everything. So they might be able to find it, but they can do a project like that where they will then share about this person and their daily routine in Spanish in the target language.
Right. Awesome. Awesome. Very, very cool. Very cool stuff. So, if we zoom out a little bit, and you've already sort of, you're a pro, Jenni, because you've already teased this out for me, which is, basically, yes, we have this important month that we've been celebrating, and we're coming, to finishing up, sort of recognizing and putting a little bit more emphasis, a little bit more focus. But you've said it multiple times already that these are ongoing things that you do in your classes and with your students, and frankly, probably I think in a perfect ideal world, it wouldn't just be in Spanish class. In all of our classes, we would be paying proper, respect and to observances and holidays like this month. So we zoom out a little bit and take less of a focus on National Hispanic Heritage Month. There are other events, holidays, observances that are particularly valuable or important or exciting within your curriculum. So hit us with what's your do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite time of year during your teaching, a particular holiday or anything like that that just gets you stoked every time that comes around each year?
I do. I definitely have a few. I like Holy Week. La Semana Santa is really fun to teach about. New Year, there's lots of fun traditions. But honestly, my favorite is probably El Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. And right, kids
That's
are learning more about it anyway already. With movies that have come out about it in the past several years, and it seems like Walmart is selling stuff for Day of the Dead now, and so they definitely know more about it, and I love to talk about Day of the Dead with them.
awesome. Yeah, that was the one I was thinking of. I remember that one. I remember
So
that. I
fun.
remember in class, there were parties. You know how it goes. Like people get
You've had
stoked
to.
about the party. Yeah, so you can't go wrong there. Um, is there? So you mentioned that students are more familiar or have been becoming more familiar with that holiday even outside of your class. Um, and that is your one of your favorites. Is there is there a part of the curriculum, maybe a person that your students study, um, that is just one of those things that always hooks the kids' interest?
Hmm. Um, Particular with Day of the Dead, not necessarily. We do look at the products. They really like to talk about the different things with Day of the Dead because we'll make both a virtual altar oh, and then like an actual altar out in the hallways. We'll build an ofrenda. Um, hmm. Anytime they get to participate in the traditions, that really hooks them. So
Yeah.
New Year's as well. They in Spain they will eat grapes counting down to midnight, and so we'll do that in class. That gets them really excited. Um, Easter they get to crack eggs over each other's head, cascarones, like they do in Mexico with confetti in them sometimes, and that's really
Nice.
fun.
Yeah, that's the I mean, and that's the stuff. I mean, we want them to we want them to grasp the language and be able to
Right.
read and write, but those are the things that are gonna stick.
Yes.
And they're gonna remember, and it's that experiential learning that I think is super valuable. I always wanted, even as an English teacher, I was always trying trying to engage students in what was, sort of time sensitive things that were happening, right?
Mhm.
So if there was something that was, if it was a holiday, maybe, but ultimately, I just always felt like if I could get them to make those connections that you talked about to the outside world, and then bring that into maybe our own grammar and language work, or the literature that we were reading, that was always something that I thought was really helpful for me. How can we compare what we just read, that was written, 100 years ago, to something that just happened that we just saw in the news or something like that.
Right.
So that's really good.
Really important.
Um, so we haven't talked much about Canvas. So
Yeah.
now I'm going to put you on the spot. Obviously, you're what fifth year teacher?
Just fifth
Okay.
year.
And how many of those have you been using Canvas?
This is my second year using Canvas, so I
Did you
was I
have it
was
in
really
college?
intimidated. I did use it in college. I was trying to remember. I'm in grad school right now. We use Blackboard, but my undergrad did use Canvas.
Yeah, yeah. So now that and I hate to say it this way because I think that using Canvas, ultimately you're wearing lots of different hats. But now that you're on the quote unquote teacher side of Canvas, um,
Yeah.
what are some things that you find particularly helpful in Canvas with your students? Not so much again about language and writing and so forth, but about these things with history and culture, like the biography stuff or the connections to, prominent figures in the culture.
Yes. So I was really intimidated by Canvas whenever they introduced, we're going to have to switch everything over. And coming out of COVID, it just seems like a ton of work.
Yep.
But thankfully, Canvas it integrates so well with Google Suite and so many other tools. So that was really, really helpful to me that all these things that I had already built for my courses and that I had used and loved with my students, I could just plug them right in and they moved over really seamlessly. So for Day of the Dead, for example, when we do build that virtual altar, we have a slide deck that I will just put right into Canvas. And that is on there on a module page for them to see, as long as they need it for the rest of the year. It's not like I have to share that with them via email or anything. It's
Right.
just going to be there forever. And they can go to that slide deck. We have the first slide is the altar that they're going to add their little products to. So somebody might do marigold and somebody might do the pan de muerto. And then they'll add their own slides. I'll a template for each other or for each of the products where they will talk about the practice and so the person who does add the marigold to the altar, they'll talk about how it how people put the marigold around graves and how they put it on the altar, and the perspective is to try to bring those souls back to earth, with the sweet smell and or the strong smell and the bright colors. And so that will all be on Canvas for them to collaborate on. With the Hispanic Americans or Latinx Americans, I can make that a whole page where, I'll separate it into number one, look at this document, and they get their instructions or they get to choose from hyperlinks. Here's Lin-Manuel Miranda's link for his document, and they can read about that. And then I use a whole lot of Flipgrid, and so we can embed Flipgrid right there for number two, and they just move down the page to number two, and they'll work on that part. I said Flipgrid. I think it's called Flip now, but I can't get over that.
But that's recent. I can't do it either. I'm with you. I was an early adopter, an ambassador long ago, and I'm with you. It's
love the tool.
Love it. Yes.
Struggle with the name.
Right, but that's what I love about you bringing that up, but then also giving those couple of examples is it's in all of the examples you gave. You're capitalizing on your ability as a teacher to basically have the best of all worlds in terms of learning. And that's always the way I felt about a learning management system like Canvas. Is it made me as a teacher, and I had it in 2012, like before the pandemic and all the other things. And I always just felt like it was a way for me to almost add another sort of universe to my classroom. And so to your point, students are physically creating something in a physical space, but then they're also enhancing that learning by having the reference to the slide deck that's there and is available as a resource that's easy for them to find. That activity that you described there with the slides where students are all editing and have their own content, it's the jigsaw. It's the jigsaw activity just in a digital realm, which I love already. But the fact that you can have that built right into your course in Canvas is super helpful. And then, the other thing that I don't think we've hit on yet, but I'm sure is something that you've utilized is video and audio. How often do you leverage something like you talked about Flipgrid? How often do you embed videos as resources or as guides for students in your classes? What other media things do you do?
Yes, I put a lot of videos onto my slides. That's kind of what I use as kind of my directional tool in class to keep me organized. However, I do love, like you said, it was really helpful during the pandemic, but now, even whenever I'm absent or whenever a student is absent, if I'm going to be absent, I can put a whole lesson, a video right there on Canvas. And, sometimes I'll do that for if I'm going to be absent, but also it's helpful if there is a relevant video that I want them to watch about, someone who is a native speaker, because that's the whole thing about culture is that we're trying to elevate voices of actual native speakers instead of this white gal who learned it as a second language and loves Spanish, but it's just not the same.
Right.
It's not going to connect with the students the same. So being able to add that video on there so they can reference it all the time is really helpful.
Awesome. To me, it was always an opportunity for me I remember always you get to the end of the class and you feel like maybe you didn't get to everything, right? And so I always, and you're probably more tech savvy than I was, but I literally was in a spiral notebook writing my lesson plans out. I wouldn't even type them. I had to write them. And I just remember every day, it was always an arrow. It was arrow from Monday. This thing's got pushed. I never could finish everything. And when my school long ago, when my school implemented and brought in Canvas, that was almost my opportunity, really not knowing anything about blended learning or online learning. Like, I didn't know anything about it. I just thought, oh, this is going to be a way for me to get more of that stuff to my students. So if we didn't have time to watch the 5-minute video in class, I could put it there. And that could be part of their, homework, or, work for the week, whatever it may be. I just felt like it opened up opportunities and options for me, and the media part of it was really important to me. As a lover of literature and art, I was always, posting artwork and architecture that was relevant to the literature that we were reading. And so that kind of stuff, I think, plays so well into world language courses, and specifically Spanish courses, because they need to see these places, see these people, and open, it just kind of opens up so many sort of avenues of learning, which I think is probably, I think it makes it easier. I don't think that it's impossible as a Spanish teacher to do all of that without Canvas. Of course not. But I think it just makes it easier.
It does.
Would that be an accurate explanation if I was going to get in your brain and explain it? Am I in the right area?
Yeah, absolutely. I love, like I said, especially when a student is absent, I can say, okay, go back, here's the day that you missed, and then go to that module page, and they can see any documents that we looked at, or they can go to the link that's embedded there that took them to an actual authentic website where we explored in class, or a video. Yes, it's a very good way to organize all that content and just have that accessible to students all the time.
Awesome. So we have this question. I've asked this question to, I can't say, maybe, probably not hundreds, multiple dozens of people through the course of 3 years worth of episodes. And it's kind of become a thing. And I honestly, I took a summer sort of hiatus, took a couple months off from doing the podcast, and I came back and I forgot it. And I finally, because I'm old, and a guest on one of my recent episodes called me out, Aaron Ferguson, and Aaron's going to listen to this and laugh, but he called me out on our episode, and we're talking, and we're getting towards the end, and he's like, Marcus, man, what happened? Are you still doing the Canvas backpack? Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so old, I forgot my own content. And and a listener had to remind me of it. But yes, for those that listen to the podcast, we like to ask our guests, what is in your Canvas backpack? And ultimately, that's just a fancy way of asking you, what is the one, strategy, tip, tool, workaround, built-in solution, or add-on? You mentioned Flipgrid. What's that one thing that's in your Canvas courses at your school that you feel like you just couldn't live without? What is if you had to pick one?
It's a hard question. There's so many great things that I do use every day. One that I feel like surprised me was the redirect tool whenever you're setting up your navigation pane in the settings. Those other websites that we do use all the time that I can just actually make in Canvas, so not even embedded on a page, but for example, Quizlet, we use a whole lot of Quizlet for our vocabulary. And so when I'm setting up my navigation pane for each course, I'll set up the redirect tool to go to our specific link for our Quizlet class. Or Pear Deck, we use Pear Deck a whole lot. And so I can have that actually just pop up right in Canvas, one-stop shop for the kids. So they don't have to go have 10 tabs open ever. It's all right there. I really love that.
I love that you said redirect, because that is low-key awesome. And I guess I don't know if everybody in the world knows that one. Like, that one's pretty awesome. If you don't know, if you're listening, watching, redirect, it's one of the apps. You go to the apps, you search, just type in redirect. And like like Jenni said, basically any website that you want kids to go to on a regular basis, you wait for it, you redirect them to that site. I know, it's clever. But what's cool is that it will put that in the navigation bar for the students, and you can call it whatever you want, which is super helpful, because yeah, you can call it Quizlet or whatever. But I also found that especially with littles, like, K through 2, we had to be a little bit creative about what we called that, and we would use sight words, things that they were more familiar with because their reading skills weren't there yet. But that is such a great sort of tool / hack. You made a good point too, that, it makes it easier for students to have all the right things in all the right places when they're working within Canvas. And that's kind of, the point. You mentioned tabs. Right. Yeah. What'd you say that again?
I said reduce that cognitive load. Make it easier for us.
Let's go. I'm yelling at my office. It's empty. It's just me. I'm yelling into everyone listening right now. Jenni, I love that. Cognitive load, people. Okay. If you don't know, Google it right now. Cognitive load. It'll blow your mind. It's so important when we're designing things online. It goes back to what clearly you have learned, clearly you have put into practice. I would assume folks around you are doing the same thing. It's something that so many folks make mistakes with, which is, I want to make it super pretty. It's going to be super busy, and I'm going to just inundate every sense that my students have with visually,
when they're already overstimulated.
yes. And exactly. And this, ladies and gentlemen, this is coming from a teacher that is working in a middle school setting, right? For at least part of the time. So when we talk about overstimulated, she's speaking from a place of truth. But yes, cognitive load and being aware of that and being cognizant of it as you design is so important. And I'm so glad that you said that. Beautiful. Woo! Talk about ending strong, Jenni. Outstanding. So glad you said that. Anything else that you want to share with the folks watching this evening, folks that are going to watch later or listen later on as this episode drops as a podcast? Any last minute pieces of advice or thoughts?
I've got to shout out our tech team at Episcopal, because I definitely wouldn't know the stuff that I know with Canvas or otherwise. They help a whole lot with my professional development. Katie Ryan, awesome. Joe Stoltz, fantastic. They're just really helpful in our school. So I'm really appreciative to them for all their help in getting me where I'm at with Canvas and tech tools. Beautiful.
Yes, that was the role that I had for a number of years, sort of tech coach, integrationist, coordinator of digital learning. And we tend to do lots of different weird things, but ultimately those people, wherever they are, listening, watching, you are appreciated because you do a lot of the fixing of things that ultimately you may not be directly working with students, but you're working with the teachers who are working with the students, and it's super, super important. Awesome shout out there. Jenni, I want to thank you for being so kind to come to the show and share some insights here on National Hispanic Heritage Month. I know that there's always new and exciting things happening in classrooms when it comes to ed tech, but my money is always on folks doing great things with Canvas. Thank you for taking a bit of your time this evening. I'm going to let you go here soon so you can probably go to bed because, let's face it, teachers you got to get to sleep so you can get up at 4 a.m. tomorrow. But thank you for all of your great insights and the ways that you've used Canvas to sort of enhance things in your classroom. For the folks listening, a couple of reminders. Be sure to tune in on social media for the Friday 5 by Instructure, which of course airs on all Canvascasters channels live at 8 a.m. Eastern. And if that's too early for you, or you're in the car, or you've got a flooding crowd of 6th and 7th graders marching into a building at 8 a.m., no worries. It will be posted all over the place. You'll see reshares all over the place from Instructure. The Friday 5 is 5 topics, 5 minutes from this guy, rapid fire, lots of caffeine. And it's a great way to kind of just get bits and pieces of the most important stuff you need for the week that was, and to get you ready for the next week when it comes to things like Canvas. And last but not least, if you are watching this and we keep saying Canvascasters and you're like, I don't know what that is, let me help you. Take my hand. Let's walk. Let's walk over to your social media, whatever it might be. Follow Canvascasters, follow Instructure. Then after you do that, go to Apple, go to Google, go to Spotify, go to wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to the Canvascasters podcast. You will get content like this with experts, educators who are sharing their shine and finding amazing ways to leverage Canvas and do great things for teaching and learning and ultimately benefiting students. So thank you again, Jenni, for being here. Go get some rest. Have a great rest of your week. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you.